Ladies and gentlemen, Season 1, Episode 16, Queen for a Day. Hi, Lunaruv. So, I should mention a little bit of a thing, Walkiness. No, you were right, Oblivion is correct. The sound font is completely different between the two. For example, this is Oblivion again. So, I want you, everyone in chat, I want you right now to think about something you really, really like. Something you consider one of the best things ever, okay? Now, I want you to also consider that someone you care about, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a coworker, loved one, whatever, is going to start watching or playing or reading that thing. Or maybe, like, they're on the way to it, or maybe they're debating it. And you now have an interesting problem. And I've noticed most people don't even consider this dilemma. It doesn't even process for them. They just say, oh, it's the greatest thing in the whole known history of the ever, and it's the super amazing super universe thing, or ever. The problem is, this is actually a dilemma, because it is extraordinarily easy to overhype. The problem with overhyping is it can diminish the impact that it actually has. For example, if I tell you, Knife Fight 37 is the best video game I've ever played, and you play it, and it is an extremely good game, but whatever you had built up in your head was just so much more, right? Like, you see where you're looking at this, like, I admit I have my own issues with this. I have had to be very quiet about certain things, especially since I just watched Andor and Arcane, two of the best shows ever made. And I do not say that hyperbolically or without professionalism. But I have to be very careful about that, because even saying that, like, if I say FF6 is one of the best RPGs ever made, then I have automatically predicated it for you if you're going to play it. And I have to be very, very careful to not overhype it, because that's just going to ruin the experience. Or at the very least, it has a high chance of ruining the experience. Even if you actually like the finished product. Even if it's something that's awesome. Now, I don't blame anyone for this, but 3 separate people all told me, this is the episode that's going to catch me. This is the one that's going to be the equivalent of Scorpion, or Measure of a Man, or whatever, right? That's also true, Bionic Punk. And this is kind of a granular field, as most things are. And I admit that I'm kind of a weirdo on this, because I analyze things as a literal job, but also for entertainment. Like, you notice that I've been coloring in all those Trek episodes. We were talking about that earlier. I'm doing that for fun, because it's interesting to me. It's fascinating to actually sit down and put a rating to things, rather than just kind of vaguely saying, yeah, Voyager Season 2 sucks, but Voyager Season 4 is awesome. That's nice, but I prefer to have more concrete data to back that up. So it's sort of impossible for me to walk into something like this episode and not analyze it, even if I wasn't doing this for the show, right? Which brings us to the episode in question. So we see Varian's dad, Kieran, who is not a good father. Varian is already studying the rocks, and Kieran is completely the opposite of supportive, and rather than explaining anything at all, neglectfully allows him to come along to go visit the king. Cool. Okay. That's great. I just want to say, there's a lot of bad dads in the show. I have a lot of venom to spit at Kieran. I know that sounds strange, but he handles this like the worst way possible. He is talking to his 14-year-old, very intelligent son, and the only thing he keeps saying is the equivalent of 3 words, it's technically 4 words, that I absolutely hate. Those words are, that's an order. I'll talk more about this. Well, I guess let's just talk about it now, because anybody who's dealt with kids ever knows that if you just tell a kid to do something, and when told why, when they ask why or want for more information, all you say is, just do it, there is very little you can do that is going to make them less likely to go ahead and do that thing. You have to either have a tremendous amount of support and backing and trust from that kid in order to actually ensure they're going to listen to you, or you need to explain something, even if it's literally just something along the lines of, I'll tell you later, or I don't have time right now. Both of those would not have actually, exactly, Lord Harriman, because that's a little bit different. Sometimes in the moment, you need things to happen immediately. That is different. That's not what this situation is at all. This is just him being a dick. Remember, he has to make the trip all the way to the castle. And thanks to some of the long shots we see of this very episode, we find out something that I've been debating this whole time. It turns out Old Corona is outside the walls, unless that's an animation error. What that means is it's not actually part of the Corona Kingdom proper. Either that or the Corona Kingdom happens to have some degree of control over it, which would make sense, since, you know, maybe they're part of the kingdom, maybe they're a vassal state, maybe they're a tributary, maybe they're just a village that happens to be in range of soldiers on horseback. We don't know. But either way, it is outside the walls. The significance here is that's a long-ass trip during which Kieran could have had tons of time to explain things to his son, which he declined to take. Things like random thought, hey, I'm going to tell the king something unusual, okay? It's going to sound like a lie, but don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Trust me. Fixed. Done. But instead, Kieran is a terrible father. Repeatedly, he is given opportunities over and over and over to say anything other than just do what you're told. And he never gets better about that. And God, it makes me want to smack him. Or maybe encase him in crystal for a while. Now, I do have to admit, the very concept of the fact that this place is called Old Corona, that they still clearly have ties to the king, that there's still some stuff going on here, like we saw the symbol, we saw the knight outfit, you know. There's some hints of world building, finally, that I can actually say are actually intentional. So, okay, there's a lot of question marks there. Hopefully we'll see those fulfilled as we go forwards. Meanwhile, petitioners. Damn it, Lord Harriman. Yeah, maybe there was a war. I've been speculating about that this whole show so far. So we get to the petitioners. The petitioners are actually fascinating because there's a bit where he says, ever since you fixed the roads, my shoe sales are down. Which, honestly, what makes me want to smack him. However, the king actually offers something close to an actual reasonable response to that. See, there's this thing called government subsidies, and for the record, a lot of people tend to not understand what that means, so it boils down to this. Subsidies is just a broad umbrella term for several different types of economic aid that a national governmental body can then offer to specific types of businesses. And you're probably thinking, oh, so that's rife for corruption. And yes, that is absolutely correct. However, government subsidies are actually critical, useful, and I would argue basically mandatory for modern society to exist. Let me explain why. It's because government subsidies are there to make sure that jobs and services that don't make a lot of money make enough money so that people do them. It's to make sure that there's always someone cleaning the toilets. It's there to make sure that someone's always farming. It's to make sure they're always producing these types of fruits, or these types of crops, or these types of animals. Yeah, some businesses just aren't profitable, but have to exist. So the subsidies are there, and again, there's different types. Like I said, it's an umbrella term. The subsidies are there to make sure that those stay profitable so they can keep existing, so the nation can keep functioning, right? That's the idea. And it's a fascinating concept, and there's a lot that can be said about this. So the king deciding, I'm going to go ahead and fund your business so that we keep having a cobbler, so if we ever need one, we've still got one, is actually smart leadership, and I just want to give the episode credit for that. That's pretty cool. He does it in a weird way, but he still does it. Credit to the episode. Then Eugene shows up briefly. Okay, whatever. And then Kieran shows up and says, Varian, children have no place in court. That's the answer he gives. The answer he gives. Why did he even bring him with? Why did he bring Varian with if he wasn't going to bring him in? And why does he allow him to view from the galley, essentially, so he could see that he lied to the king? Now, I will give the episode credit. Both the king and Kieran do a pretty good job of, making sure that the code words that they're saying are actually pretty well constructed. It would be really easy to be like, wink, wink, hey king, we need to activate the special protocol because the whatcha-figgy is whatcha-higging, wink. But instead, they're actually really quiet about it. He just says, hey, Bountiful Harvest, we need your permission to take the extra land to proceed. And he says, you have my blessing, do what you have to do. Done. Smart. It's twice now this episode's impressed me. It's a shame then, because the immediate thing that happens immediately after this is Kieran wanders off and doesn't explain things to his son at all. And when his son actually tries to discuss things in return, the only response he has is, and I wrote it down word for word, "That's enough." That's how he shuts down the conversation. What is wrong with this guy? For the record, this is now the third time he has shut Varian down, and we're not that far into this episode. Cool. Also, I have to point out, this is a really minor thing, but the audio engineer in me has to point out that whoever is voicing Kieran has a noticeably worse mic quality than everyone else. Moving on. So, we see a bit of a training montage. We see the rocks and how things are getting really, really wrong. And of course, he says, "Listen, you've got to help me." And she says, "Everything's going to be okay. I've got your back. I promise." And we all know what that means. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole again. I'm just saying, we now have the Chekhov's promise, which now proves that this is going to go terribly wrong in the future. Cool. So then the king tells her, "Listen, you're in charge, but you need to listen to the voice in your heart, and that's the one you should follow," which is interesting advice coming from a dictator. So the second they're around the corner, there's a kitchen raid. Cassandra goes after him with a sword. This is all neat. One of the things that caught my eye is immediately after this, there's a petition, which means they have daily petitions. I believe that. Remember, this is a Disney kingdom, so it's probably supposed to be portrayed as a benevolent kingdom, even though there's evidence to the contrary. So, Chekhov's, I might start using that, Chekhov's promise. So yeah, daily petitions. Cool. So the line is much worse than usual, because of course it's this gigantic line of death of all these people who are, you know, wanting to talk to the extremely popular Princess Rapunzel. That tracks. Meanwhile, Varian is plotting things. There's also this wonderful bit, and it's funny because I just called Varian smart, but he also misses the obvious. He's already said that the rocks are connected to her. But what he hasn't mentioned is that the pathway of the rocks and where they've been spotted forms a straight line going from Old Corona straight to New Corona, to the castle. Doesn't even comment on that, even though it's very obvious from the map he shows. This is also when I really start debating some of the specifics of exactly the nature. This is in my notes where I was like, what is the nature of Old Corona? How does it... We've already talked about this. I'm just mentioning this is when all those thoughts really came from. Anyways. Why are they trusting the renovation job to the thugs? I'm not mad. I'm actually just curious. So then we have a song. Okay. Not bad. We actually have two, technically three songs in this episode. I'm with it. I'm with it. Pasture land is now stated as being public. Okay, that's actually not a bad answer to that first problem. We're going to give you earplugs in order to deal with the violin. Okay, that's actually not a very good answer, but we'll go with it. But then we find out the city is overrun with cats, so we'll just feed them here. That is a terrible idea on every level. You know, and the obvious fact that cats are part of the ecosystem for a good reason. There's also the fact that cat overpopulation is a very real problem. In fact, it's so much of a real problem, it's a problem we're facing right now in real life in the country I live in. And it is a problem that is still actually getting worse as of this very moment in time. Yeah, there's other ways they could have solved several of these. Now, granted, Rapunzel's probably never heard of spading and neutering. But... anyways, this immediately then leads to all of these answers going horribly, horribly wrong. We can't tell who's sheep or whose. I bothered to look that up. That's on the shepherds. I'm sorry. There are lots of ways that people have developed for centuries, if not longer, to determine whose sheep are what. There's ways to paint them, there's ways to tattoo them, there's ways to mark them. Also, the sheep themselves operate a lot based off of smell. So, if you just go and stand there, and the other one goes and stands there, there's a really good chance your sheep will come to you, because you're the familiar smell. And yeah, I'm not going to get into the concept of shepherd dogs, who also operate on smell, by the way, and will also know whose sheep is what. Like, there's so many ways around this, it's kind of silly. I decided to only glance at the list of how many ways shepherds mark their sheep, and then I was like, okay, that's all I need to see to know that these people are idiots. Moving on. The haircut thing, yeah, of course he has trouble hearing his people, but that probably should make him a worse haircutter. Like, just say, hey, what's your haircut, and then listen, and then, okay, now... and then the cats go out, but the rats move in? Okay. And meanwhile, Rapunzel's like, I suck so much, and I'm terrible. And I get the overall thrust of the song, but I wasn't a big fan of the song, is what I'm trying to get across here. Unfortunately, it all makes sense because Rapunzel doesn't like lemonade. So the first bit of snow arrives. Okay. I do like her reaction to the snow. I remember my first snow. I was 7. I remember it distinctly. And... give me a sec, Mr. Ed. I'm trying to push through a little bit, but I do want to hear your thoughts. Her song is relatable. I do agree. I just think the construction needed some work, as a lot of things in the show does. The way she's dealing with the snow, the way she reacts to it, it's actually kind of really awesome. And I also like how Eugene has the exact opposite reaction, which sounds like a lot of people I know who've lived in the snow for a long period of time. Yeah, cool. Either way. So then we cut to Max, who's still taking them to the resort. I don't want to hammer on this point, but shouldn't they be there by now? Ariana flat out said they should be there by noon. So unless it's literally midday at this point, and that was just the morning's petitions, why are they still going to the resort? I know that's a really weird thing to nitpick, but when they cut to Max carrying the carriage, my first thought was, why are they still traveling? It's also possible the scenes aren't chronological, or the scene happens very, very, very quickly. I don't know, it struck me. It feels like that's the kind of thing that needs a little bit of a polishing pass to smooth over, but moving on. So it's snowing, stuff is going. Kieran, we cut to Kieran. Kieran's getting geared up. A lot of implications here. This is probably the first scene which I can say with 100% certainty is building up to something. I can say that because it's the most overt, on-the-nose thing I've ever seen. That's a lie. But it's really, really obvious. He's like, okay. He looks at the symbol. Then he pulls open the thing, and then he looks at the helm, which has the symbol. And he looks up at himself in the picture, and there's the symbol. And he's got the thoughts of himself and his younger self, and he looks at himself, and there's the symbol, and it's like, oh my god, I get it. You're building up to something. I get it. But then he doesn't spit it out. He doesn't explain what the hell he's doing or why 3 times in a row in this scene. And each time Varian is just trying to get him to actually talk to him. Which, frankly, relatable. I remember being 14. I actually hated being 14, not just because of the obvious reasons, because my mother was not very communicative, is how I'm going to phrase that. And that's going to be the nicest way I can phrase that. Because there was some things, and I had some issues as a direct consequence of that. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. So just talk to me. No. Do what you're told. Okay. Cut back to, not Cassandra, sorry, Rapunzel, who, of course, actually has boots on. Holy crap, she's actually got boots. I even double-checked to make sure. More toys to sell. Not that they did. Cassandra says something. She says to Eugene, stop trying to exploit your position. Start trying to put it to good use, which makes sense, considering her overall arc for this entire show so far has been, be useful. This is also when Xavier gives us our first thing about a Xantiri, some evil demon guy, who, at this point, we're just straight up D&D, by the way, who cast this horrible snow curse, and the way they defeated it was they pushed the snow to the sea. That has a lot of question marks attached to it, but I imagine that's not literally what happened. Then again, we see it at the end of this episode, so I don't know. Either way, point being, whoosh. Yeah, we need to introduce the MacGuffin. Yep, we need to know about the, I wrote down a pronunciation guide. Demanitus, I think, device. So, cool. Either way, then her parents go over the edge. I really doubt it, but if her parents straight up died here, that would finally make her a Disney princess, wouldn't it? That might be the darkest thing I said today. Anyways, so the Motley crew agrees to go help her parents. Nice little touch, actually. They also promise, so it's going to go badly. Cool, cool. Got another Chekhov's promise here. That's right. In place of a Disney princess, you will have a Disney queen! Dark and beautiful as the sea. It's treacherous as the sea. Dark and beautiful as the dawn. There we go. So, Then we see that Kieran is being encased by crystals. What is encasing him? Like, they don't actually explain it, and they imply it through several lines of dialogue that it's actually the rocks, but it's clearly not the rocks. It's this alchemical crap that Varian put on the rocks. But we don't know what it is. I just wanted to comment on that because it's like you feel like there's a lot of different ways he could get to his father in there, but instead it's just Like, yeah, is this mutated rocks? Is this second gen Tiberium? I don't know. Like, there's got to be something going on. I, of course, do not know, because I know nothing. But it's just the weird thing, because then the kid decides to rush off. Now, I don't actually mind that. We'll get to that in a minute. But I don't mind him rushing off to go get Rapunzel, because we finally have the Broadway singer sing a song. He's got some good pipes, too. Legitimately, there's some shifts and notes. I can't even do it. I can't even do it properly. My own voice trembled just trying to do that demonstration of a single note shift. It's really good stuff. It's also very topical. He sees himself as nothing but a disappointment, and he says that his father doesn't understand him or how he operates, and he desperately wants to prove himself. Yes, that's right. He's a Disney princess. I also love the single line I wrote down here. That look of surprise when you see your sun rising. I want to see your look of surprise when you see your sun rising. Ouch. And based on what we've seen of Kieran, yeah. I'm sorry, Kieran's a terrible father. I don't know what he is elsewise, but he is a terrible father. So I completely feel Varian in this moment. So, meanwhile, the blizzard's getting worse, and they're talking about evacuating to the mainland. That's its own problem. So, there's a lot that could be said about that, but I decided not to delve too much into the dilemma. Just, we'll come back to that in a minute. Varian shows up at about this point, says, my dad's in danger and you're the only one who can help. Why? How? Now, you're probably expecting me to nitpick this scene, but actually no. As weird as this may sound, this scene is near perfect. Of all of the scenes in this episode, this is one that I have literally zero complaints about. Why? Because this is a 14-year-old child who is desperately afraid for his father, who he isn't sure what's happening to him, and the only lead he has of any way, shape, or form is this woman who he knows has a connection to those rocks. That's it. That's all. Please come help. Panic, panic, panic. And while what he's saying is functionally, like, I don't want to say stupid, but feels stupid, like, I don't think her coming to help him would have fixed anything, is what I'm trying to say. But she's all he's got, so she's who he runs to, and he is scared, and in a very childlike kind of a way. This scene is actually awesome, and as they're carrying him away, I felt for him. And Rapunzel, deciding not to help him and fix things was fundamentally the correct call. We'll come back to that in a minute. Meanwhile, there's a really, really great line. Oh yeah, there's Chekhov's promise firing off, by the way. Thank you, King Sao. I know I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I apologize. There's a really great tidbit. It cuts over to the king and queen. They're in the carriage. They're started a little bit of a fire. His ankle is broken. And they've already consigned themselves to death. And I love how quietly and simply they say that. He's just saying, we have more to worry about than my ankle. The kingdom, there's so much left undone. And all she says is, she'll make a great queen. That's actually pretty powerful. Unfortunately, the guard troop does actually find them and starts the rescue part of the plot. But we'll come back to that in a minute. This then gets to Rapunzel making the evacuation call. This itself is already kind of debatable. It's one of those wonderfully horrible things, isn't it? I know that sounds strange, but hear me out for a second. I'm going to bring up COVID, because it's really easy with the advantage of hindsight to look at some of the national governments, which were... did I really? Yay! Which were, slow in reacting to the COVID pandemic. Let's put it that way. Let's be nice about it. Not the horrible countries, just some of the ones that were slow in reacting to it, and say, oh, they were idiots. They should have been right on top of that from the word to go. Thing is, that's not always as obvious as it seems in the moment. There's a pretty big gap between there's something happening and there's something real happening. And if you decide to mobilize your nation at a governmental level because of something that isn't a pandemic, that's a lot of money and time and expense and bother on you. It's probably the end of your career, and a whole lot of people have just wasted a whole lot of time and effort and resources that they can't really afford to waste. However, on the exact flip side of that is that if it is something real and you don't react until it is too late, now you're inadequate. And now you are taking flailing measures far later than you probably should have, because it is actually something real, and you need to be treating this seriously. And you see the problem, right? Right there. Both sides have their own thorns, and you don't really tend to know in the moment which side is correct. Now, this varies from government to government and from individual to individual, because some governments were pretty on top of the COVID thing and said, yeah, this is real, and got on top of it immediately. Other ones didn't have what I would call the most reliable sources of information. I think that's the best way to put that. And therefore we're like, oh yeah, this isn't a big deal. Oh, it is a big deal. Oh crap. And that led to lots and lots of horrible deaths and other things. That sucks. What's the relevance to the episode? She doesn't call for the evacuation until it's too late. And that's the relevance. If she had called for the evacuation right up front, there's actually a decent chance they could have gotten a decent number of people off the end of the mainland. She didn't. She waited till it was too late because she wasn't sure. And as a consequence, it was too late, as the term implies. It's interesting to think about, because in the moment, it's never really an easy decision to make. And yet, Rapunzel doesn't know how to deal with any of this stuff. Of course she doesn't. She's never been a queen, and she's never dealt with this kind of environmental disaster. And, as we already mentioned earlier, we fully really upgraded to the fact that we have a straight-up demon now. And a giant magical device of doom. So, yeah. So she makes the call. Get out. This is also a debatable thing, because at this point, the docks are no longer functional. If the docks were still operable, that might have been really capable of easing the evacuation, but instead, you're just reliant on the bridge now. Congrats. I do like how the guards are helping with the evacuation. That's good. And I do like how Varian gets back and completely loses it upon seeing his father. We saw the father scribble something on a note, but it is completely encased. There's like a solid foot of crystal between the edge and between where his hand is. So he's not going to be able to see that foot anytime soon. Cool. So. And yeah, Elsa, could you stop? Could you stop? It's love. The answer's love. Jesus Christ. So, fleeing from the blizzard may or may not abate things. They don't actually know. They're not fully aware of what's going on. I do think that at this point, Rapunzel finally makes the correct call. The correct call is evacuate while we go check out the possible solution. You need to do both. You need to allocate your resources and look into it, because if the solution is really there, it needs to be applied, because evacuation will not work. If the solution does not exist and this is just a blizzard, then you need to get the hell out of Dodge, because there is no other solution. Doing both was correct, so I'll give them credit on that point. So they go into the tunnels into Corona. Boy, that sounds familiar. There's a lot of breather sections, for lack of a better way to pull it. A lot of sections where they just give it a few moments to, let things sit. Sometimes it's an action-y sequence. Sometimes it's just showing the events that you know are happening, like pulling the king up along the edge of the cliffside. Oh, also, there's an explosion of alcohol which takes out the bridge. Is this yet another infrastructure problem? I'm just wondering at this point. They have a thing with bridges in this setting, it seems. Then we see the Demonitus device. It's pretty big. A shame Variant isn't here. If Variant was here, he'd probably be very useful. Either way, Frederick goes to fall. And I have to say, his line, "Take care of Rapunzel." I'm like, okay, then kill him. Just kill him. Just kill him. Just kill him. Do it. Upgrade her. Make her a Disney queen. Or, I mean, princess. Excuse me. But no, he's fine. Of course he lives. Of course they're not going to kill him, and of course they're not going to kill Pascal. If I might speak briefly, one of the biggest reasons I dislike plot shields is because of these scenes. It's hard to care At least for me, I'm probably the weirdo here. It's hard to care about all the tension of will they rescue Frederick or will they rescue Pascal, because the answer is of course they will. They even do the fake out. In fact, in both cases, they do a fake out. And I'm like, they're fine. You're not going to kill either of these characters, which is a shame because I think they should have killed both. No, I'm serious. Keep the queen. She's a good dynamic and she'd be functionally in charge and she'd have to deal with some stuff. And kill Pascal. He just refreshed his friendship with them, renewed that he is her best friend ever, and this is the kind of thing that would have a massive, demonstrable, and negative impact on Rapunzel henceforth. And Pascal dying in service of literally saving the kingdom by using this massive device, I mean, that's a hell of a way to go. They do neither. Moving on. So, crisis is averted, the blizzard's taken out. Perfect. Now that there's no emergency, she immediately runs over to Varian to figure out what's wrong with him. Because remember, his situation was unrelated to the blizzard. And she knows he needs that help. In fact, she even laments it when she's talking to Eugene as she's painting. So she's had enough time to paint, but she's not going to go help Varian. Go help. Why aren't you going to Varian? And honestly, this right here, right at the end, is where the episode finally lost me here. Because I've actually been pretty positive about this episode this whole time. But then, for absolutely no reason whatsoever, and really, they don't even bother to try and give an explanation, Rapunzel, who is lamenting the fact that she couldn't help him when he needed it, refuses to go check on him. I honestly think that's legitimately out of character. Never mind the fact that it just doesn't make sense in just general logic. That should have been like number 2 in her mind back there, especially since it's bothering her enough that she comments on it in the scene. Yeah, it's very because plot. And the only reason this is because plot is because we then cut over to him, and now Varian's like, mwahaha. And he has a dark reprise for his earlier song. Still a good song. And now he's going to be like, I will do whatever it takes, and no one will stand in my way. And I'm like, I would have actually legitimately given the episode that extra little oomph of praise if, as he's there giving his song about how I will do whatever it takes to defeat them, and then just Rapunzel walks in right at there. It's like, okay, I'm here. I'm sorry it took me so long. And Varian's like, what? Yeah. Here's my dad. And she's like, we got this. And she helps him. And that's that, right? It's just diffused right then and there. That would be awesome. That would be perfect. It would have been funny as hell. And it would have been such a perfect, like, subversion of exactly what they actually did do. And it would have made sense, and it would have been in character, and no massive triple negative scene right at the end of the episode. Instead, Varian's a bad guy now? Like, imagine Rapunzel, like, smashes in... and, like, literally runs in. It's like, oh, my God, Varian, I'm so sorry. And gives him this big hug. And you just see him, like, melt back into her as he just is like, oh, okay. Don't worry, we'll figure this out. We'll save your dad, I promise. I promise we'll save your dad. Okay. We'll save him. Right? Like, it just... No. Evil Varian. Which is okay, I'm used to Evil Varian. I watch Warcraft. Anyways... I guess I should say I play Warcraft. We gotta rate this sucker. It's a good question, Lord Harriman. I don't know. I will say this right up the front. I don't think it reaches purple. That's not really a surprise. If nothing else, that last scene kills any possibility of purples. That's just off the board. I think with a few relatively minor touches, this could have reached purple status. I really actually enjoyed this quite a bit. Let me look at some other red episodes. What do we got here? What do we got? Yeah, it's true. There's no shortage. There's no asshole this episode, right? Wrong. Actually, Kieran was the asshole this episode. We haven't gotten away from that. You know, I'm feeling red. Looking at a few other red episodes, I'm feeling red. I honestly think it's a little bit of a low red, to be quite honest with you. But I still think it tips over the line above very good. Aside from the fake out deaths and the thing at the end, I was actually very into it the entire time. Better thought out consequences, better character bits, better musical direction, better voice acting, usual excellent animation that's been through the whole thing. Well, see, that's a question, isn't it? Because red is a gradient, remember? In fact, I could even tell you it's a gradient of about 16%. So this is like a 72 as opposed to like an 84. It is also a two-parter. That's true. The status quo has been altered. Rapunzel does not want to be a queen, and Varian is now our villain. So, yeah, no, I think low red is still red. As the saying goes. And yes, that's our first red so far. So, Mr. Red. Mr. Red says... Hang on, I gotta get my Mr. Red voice going. Give me one second. I think there's a reason that your own may never properly got into this, and why it swings and near misses so hard like this. And I think the reason is quite simple. This show is well animated, well made, well written, but it's a kid's show. I don't mean that in terms of like being a kid's show, but it is in terms of mindset. And I think that's what stops it from sticking the landing. And actually, I kind of feel you on that. I joke about the, that's true, Ross. I joke about the idea that there's a mandate of one asshole per episode, but I'm not actually joking. I'm turning it into a joke, because haha. But no, there's clearly a checklist for episodes. I'm sure you've been noticing this. I'm sure you've been paying attention to how much they mandate X, Y, and Z for each of these episodes. And yeah, the formula is clear there. There's some quality on display, some high quality on display, but I do absolutely think that whoever was shackling this show was not doing a good job with it. Fun fact, I actually have a pretty good idea of who the shackle is coming from, like as an individual, singular person. I'm not going to share who now, but it is something that I've already done a little bit of research on. Don't worry, I haven't spoiled anything. Just, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and push for at least one more episode. I'm going to take a very brief break, and then we're going to jump into Season 1, Episode 17, Painter's Block.